Welcome to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and, of course, a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. This is Elizabeth Townsend Guard. I'm a law professor at Tulane University Law School, and I just wanna quilt. So today we talked with Suzy Webster. She is a elementary school teacher, and she's also a published quilt author. We'll talk to her about that and why now, after being with a very important publisher, she's gone to self-publishing.
My name is Suzy Webster, and I am calling from Apple Valley, Minnesota, which is a suburb of the Twin Cities area.
Awesome. And what's your first memory of someone sewing or quilting in your life?
My mom has quilted my entire life. She started on her right after her honeymoon.
Really?
And I made my first quilt at 8.
Awesome. I love it. That's really cool. And do you remember what that first quilt was?
Yeah, I remember vividly getting to go to the fabric store and pick out my fabric that I wanted for my quilt.
Now, so when I went to the fabric store at 13, I was a bit shy and I was kind of a pushover. So people kept picking out stuff I didn't really like, but I wasn't strong enough to tell them I didn't like it. Did you have that experience, or were you able to actually decide the fabric you liked? And
we were in a Hancock Fabrics, and we were just shopping all by ourselves, and I got to pick out what I liked. That's
really cool. Even to this day, I get a little bit like people will be like, you should put that in. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I'm like, wait a second. No, I am not putting that in. And what did you make in that first quilt? What was it?
It was a 9-block sampler.
Wow.
In pink and purple calicos.
That's so cool. And
I quilted it in stitches that are like an inch long. And I still have it. It's hilarious.
That's so great. I love it. And so how did you always quilt? Did you always, for me it comes and goes in my life, but were you consistent in quilting throughout your life, or?
I have been since probably middle school. And I think the reason for that is when I was a teenager, my parents decided there was no television in our house for the summer. So all the televisions were taken to the basement, and we literally could not watch television. If I got sick, it got brought back up, but that was it.
Really?
So we had to find other things to do with ourselves, and that's when I really got into quilting, and it's been a passion ever since.
Interesting. And would you see it as something that's your hobby or that you do professionally? Do you see sort of
I think it's more professional for me at this point, but it's also a hobby. It's kind of almost as overwhelming in my life as my job.
Yeah, I get it. Me too. What makes it, is there a divide? I'm starting to believe there is not a divide, but is there a divide between the hobbyist and the professional?
I guess I'm not a total professional. I don't teach on the national circuit or anything like that. So for me, it's a matter of choosing what I want to do in order to make money at this, and choosing what I don't want to do. And for me, I've kind of come to the point that I have a full-time job, which I enjoy most of the time. And for me, this is my fun. And so if it's not fun, I don't want to do it.
Yeah. And I totally get it. Yeah, there was a moment, because I try to quilt every single night, even if I'm, way overly tired, and I was just like, oh, God, I have to go quilt. And I'm like, wait a second. No. It's, the fun part of the day. You can't feel oh, I have to quilt. So tell me, when you said that your definition is you want to do stuff that produces income, what have you found that produces income?
Well, I've been doing trunk shows around the area, which is an absolute blast. Just go and talk about my quilts. And the first time I did one, my mom asked, did you plan what you're going to say? I'm like, no, the quilts talk for themselves. I pick one up and I just go with what comes to me about that quilt at that moment.
Yeah.
And I've been teaching classes for guilds, which is a blast. I enjoy teaching because that's what I do as a career to begin with.
What do you teach?
I published my first book through the American Quilter Society.
Yeah.
And that was a fabulous experience, but then they went out of publishing. And so the next two I did on free motion patterns, and I decided to self-publish because it was just easier.
That's really interesting. We are looking into, because we're writing this book. We're trying to figure out what the book is exactly, but we're trying to decide what to do with it. And tell us a little bit more about self-publishing. Tell us more about the difference between being at a publisher and doing self-publishing, sort of what that route was for you.
Okay, so it's a funny story. At the time I was teaching 5th grade, forgive my birds in the background. I can't tell them to be quiet.
Do you have somebody behind you?
I was teaching 5th grade. I had an assignment with my students about internet safety. And they had to write down what they would want to find if they Googled themselves in 10 years.
Wow, that's a great
assignment. And so, of course, they wanted to know what would be on my list. And the first thing on my list was I will publish a quilting book. And so that kind of started me off, and I knew what I wanted to do. And I looked up what you had to submit for a book proposal, which is rather lengthy.
Yeah.
And it took me about a year to get everything together because I was working full time. And I sent it off with a hope and a prayer. I remember sending it the day before school started. And about mid-October, I got an email that it was accepted for publication.
Oh, my goodness.
And I completely freaked out my students, and I had a very good afternoon that day because I was very excited. And, then I had 3 months to get everything written and done and quilted and sent to them.
That's a lot.
And then they put it together. And
what was the book called?
Let's see, due in February. Folk Art Quilted Traditions. And you can still buy it through the American
I'm sorry, say it one more time.
Folk Art
Quilted
Traditions.
Oh, cool.
And it's based on, it's applique patterns based on Hungarian embroidery, which is where my mother and my grandmother were born.
Really?
In Hungary. So.
Okay, folk art. I'm looking it up. Quilted Traditions. Oh,
so
really
anyway,
cool.
The book came out in August, and it was really interesting because it sold a lot right away.
Uh-huh.
And ever since then, it's been a trickle. Like, I get a royalty check for $5,
uh-huh.
which amuses me.
Yeah.
Whereas the self-publishing, I obviously make more per book.
Yeah.
Because it's mine, and I can print them in small quantities, and I just have them spiral bound because I find them more useful that way because you can have them folded open all the way.
That's really interesting.
And, I haven't printed a lot of them, but I have sold them when I go and I teach and I do trunk shows. And, I think that in some ways having them has gotten me some classes because I've had a lot of the guilds that I've gone and spoken at ask me to come back to teach machine quilting later. Interesting. Because they liked my work.
Yeah. So tell me the process of publishing when it's spiral bound. How it looks like it's maybe how long is the new book? The new book is Paisley Circles and Swirls.
Right.
And so how many pages is the book? Let's start there.
It's got 44 different quilting designs, so it's probably about 55 pages because there's some other material in there.
Okay.
And I quite literally typed it up in Microsoft Word.
Yeah.
And printed it out, went in, drew all the illustrations myself. I have tried computer-aided graphic software, and it is just not me.
It's not you.
It drives me crazy.
Yeah.
So I literally drew them all myself, and then I went and had it copied at our local copy center.
That's really interesting.
And I get them copied 50 at a time, and when I run out, I go copy 50 more.
So what's your margin? So how much does it cost to print it? Like about how much?
It costs about $5 a book.
$5 a book to print.
Yeah.
And then, interesting. And then it's cool. You sent me a page. You spent swirl flower, number 8. Number 8. There's more. There's a lot of swirl flowers.
There's 9 of them. There's flowers.
Number 8. Okay. Cool. Sorry, I'm looking at it to see.
That's fine.
I'm way into trying. I want to find can I actually master this? And I'm not totally convinced of it. So I'm always looking at new ways to do free motion quilting.
Well, what I would say is I just went back to a guild for the second time locally. Mm-hmm. And The lady looked at me when I walked into the room. She goes, "You're the one who taught me how to free motion quilt, and I can do it now."
Really?
So excited.
All right. You might have to. You might have. I don't. I'm not. I'm. That's interesting. So. Oh, there we go. Okay. Cool. Interesting. So yeah. Okay. So you do it for you. It costs $5 to purchase to copy them. How much do you sell them for?
15.
And then when you go to guild shows, how much do you, I mean, if you do, and you always sell them for 15, you don't discount it at all.
No.
So that's reasonable. Interesting. And people buy them?
Yeah.
Interesting. Huh. And then how much did, yeah, go ahead.
What I found is that because they're less than $20,
yeah,
they're inviting.
Yeah.
And I don't know. More people free motion quilt than applique.
Yeah.
And so it always surprises me when the applique book sells more, because usually it's the free motion books that sell.
And did you do a self-published applique book as well?
No, that was the one I published through.
So tell me, how much were, like, did you on the, so you didn't have any upfront, they didn't give you any money upfront for the book, is that right? For the professional book. And then how much were you getting per book? Did you have a royalty rate on that one?
Yeah, you get 5%.
Which is like
$1.15.
Wow. So you're not making really much of anything on that one. This one you're making $10 a book. The other one you were making $1 something.
Right. I can buy them myself copies for 50% of the price, and then I make $10 a book if I sell them myself.
How much is the cost of the book that if you buy them yourself?
It's half of $23, so $11.50.
Still a lot. That's a lot. I mean,
yeah.
You have to invest quite a bit to get.
I save up money from my sales before I either print or purchase more books.
That's craziness.
Yeah.
Now, what made you decide to do it this way, as opposed to, say, create space on Amazon or something like that? Like, why the spiral-bound sort of basic, go to your local print shop kind of strategy?
I'm doing everything locally. I haven't traveled more than 2 hours from home to speak.
Yeah.
And it just seemed to me that I wanted to go local. That was part of it. You wanted to
go local.
The other incentive is I knew how to do that.
Yeah.
Create space and all those things I'm sure are wonderful, but I wanted to hand draw things. Yeah. And that can become an issue. So just drawing it and printing it that way was easier.
That's really interesting.
I really haven't looked into Create Space at all.
Well, we are, so we'll tell you more if we decide to go that way. It's interesting. They have two things with it. Corey, my research assistant, I'm like, well, can you look into self-publishing? She gives us like 50 different, like she's like overly ambitious. So we're looking through all the stuff that she did, and I'll post it. But Create Space is interesting because it's either you do it wholesale and you can buy them plus shipping, or you can get a percentage of the sale, which is very small. I mean, not very small. It just depends on the price of it. So that either they sell it or you sell it. Now, are you selling this on? I've lost your website. Are you selling this on your website as well? Yes.
You send me an email and then I send you a PayPal invoice.
You send me a PayPal invoice. Got it. Interesting. And how have the internet sales been? Is that something that you care about, or? They're
totally random.
Yeah.
Some months I might sell 5, some months I don't sell any.
Yeah.
And for me, this isn't something that I'm trying to make a living at. It's something where I'm trying to share my knowledge and cover my fabric and thread habits.
Yeah. No, I get it.
So.
Okay, I'm at your website. Cool. And then you're also doing patterns on Crafty. So tell me a little bit about that, about selling on Crafty.
You know, I only have one pattern up there, and it's up there because I was part of a row along last summer, and that's where they asked us to put our patterns.
Got it. Have you seen much sales?
I sold, the first month you could download it for free, and then it was $5, and I think I've sold exactly one. One of the interesting challenges of Crafty is the sheer volume of stuff on that website.
Yeah.
And I've heard mixed reviews of sales on that site.
Interesting. Well, that makes sense because it's a lot. There's a lot going on. Do they take a percentage of the sale if you post?
No, they don't.
So, and do you have to pay anything to be on Crafty? They just want the traffic.
No, you don't.
So it's a free platform to put your stuff. Is it exclusive? Do you have to only sell it there?
I don't remember.
Interesting.
I've only done it once.
All right, so I'm also looking at so we're at websterquilt.blogspot.com if people want to look at what I'm looking at. So I'm now looking at gallery of award-winning quilts. Tell me about award-winning quilts. And I love Pulse. Oh my gosh, it's so pretty. All of them are pretty, but I'm always sort of drawn to those kinds of quilts. And your whole cloth, incredible. Incredible.
My mom has always entered in our local Minnesota Quilters show. And I think I've been a member of Minnesota Quilters since high school. And, you know, there's judge categories and there's non-judge categories. And at one point, I remember her telling me that we should enter them in judged, even if they weren't great, because then more people see them.
Yeah.
And I went, okay. And I remember, I think I was in college when my first quilt took a ribbon at that show, my very first ribbon anywhere. And I just remember this feeling of euphoria. I screamed. I was so excited.
That's so cool.
We were walking around with all of our quilting friends, and it sort of became an addiction to be competitive about it. And so for a long time, that was the majority of what I was doing when I was quilting, was working on my next show.
And what is it? So here's my thing. I always start out like, this is going to be like in the most amazing quilt that anyone's ever seen. And by the end, I'm like, I totally don't think this quilt is even worth finishing. So like, there's this whole like process every time. So I want to know, what is it when you start to work on a show quilt? What is your process that I don't really get?
The first thing I think about is what I can do that's different, because the judges like things that they've never seen before. And so that's also something I do with my blog posting, is what's new, what's different, what can I try, what haven't I done? And so I tend to start there.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll work in EQ6 if I'm developing piecing, or EQ7.
Yeah.
Sometimes I hand draw if it's applique. And I kind of just let it go. I found that I design best at about 9 o'clock at night when my filter is turned off and I don't criticize everything that I draw.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's
and I've
really
actually talked to my cousin who's a painter about that, and he says the same thing. You're less self-critical when you're kind of just tired. So when I have those tired evenings like you were talking about, that's when I sit and doodle and things just come to life.
So you think that nighttime quilting isn't a bad thing then? I always feel like I'm at my worst, but I might be at my best. Is that what you're saying? That kind of way overly, that a filter is off? And so you
right.
just
I don't criticize what I'm doing as harshly when I'm that tired.
Interesting.
So,
very interesting.
And then, the design goes from there. Sometimes designs start with a fabric. I have one quilt in there called Kaboom. And it started with this orange batik that I had bought because I fell in love with it. And of course it never worked because it's rather loud. And so the whole quilt was designed about how can I focus on that fabric. And
that's really interesting.
Showcase it.
You're way into batik. Tell us a little bit. Not all of them are that way. Actually, it's kind of ironic because your stuff, that's a batik, using batiks, but a lot of your stuff isn't batiks on your winning quilts. Is that right?
It started out where it wasn't batiks, but I would say in the last 8 years, 90% of it is batiks.
Really?
I don't tend to necessarily use batiks as a background fabric when I'm appliquing because it's sometimes harder to applique through.
Yeah.
But the reason that I like batik fabric is it doesn't shred.
Oh.
It doesn't fray.
Interesting.
And when you're doing an applique piece, whether it's by hand or machine and turned edge or not, not fraying is a fabulous thing.
And they look less, I mean, not in a bad way, but they look kind of less batik-y because you've got smaller bits of it.
Right.
So it doesn't kind of overwhelm. I mean, I like batiks a lot, but they are very, specific thing. So tell us the flower in a pot quilt along. Tell me a little bit about that too.
Well, I started blogging because when I sent out my book proposal, it basically said, if you don't have a web presence, you need to start one now.
Yeah.
And I went, okay, but if I'm going to do a blog, it needs a purpose because I can't just be random about it.
It's hard.
So I decided that my purpose was to try things that I had never tried before and didn't want to put in a show quilt because I hadn't tried it before, and that was scary to put into a quilt that you're spending so much time on. So a few months into it, I realized that people were doing quilt-alongs, so I decided, well, I better do one of those too if everybody else is doing that.
And what year was this?
What?
What year were you saying?
2016.
2016, got it.
Mm-hmm. And so I started designing flower blocks probably at 9 o'clock at night when my brain was tired. And just had a blast because I could pick out my really busy batiks.
Yeah.
That would work great in a pot that you can't necessarily use very easily because they're so busy and complicated.
Yeah. Interesting.
And so that was really fun.
And then you did another one, is the brick wall free motion quilt along. That's interesting
I started that because I was realizing in my show quilts I was using the same, 8 or 10 background fills all the time.
Yeah.
And I was getting bored. And so I challenged myself. I think there were like 28 bricks on that quilt. I challenged myself to come up with a different free motion pattern every week.
Wow. That's really cool.
And so most of those patterns are in the first book, plus a few more. It's called Free Motion Fillers, I think, simply. And then I continued that on into the second book, where there's 44 fillers that are actually in my brand new show quilt that I'm working on binding at the moment.
Very cool. Tell me a little bit about your Machine Applique Adventures Facebook group.
I started that when I did my 100th blog post, because I went online into Facebook and I realized there weren't really any applique groups for machine appliqueurs.
Interesting.
There were hand applique groups, but there weren't any for machine applique. So I decided to put it out there and see what happened.
Yeah.
And I post all of my blog post links in there. And so that's another way that you can see my blogs.
That's really great.
And have access to them.
And when you do machine applique, do you use, what's your process? What's your favorite process of doing machine applique? I'm a little scared of it, I have to say. So I'm supposed to do machine applique today on a quilt, and I've kind of put it off for a while.
My favorite fusible is Steam-A-Seam 2, regular or light, doesn't really matter to me, because it's sticky on both sides. So, you trace your shape, you cut it out loosely, you stick it to your fabric, and you cut out the piece. And what I like about it is it's sticky on the other side. So it's like applying a Post-it note. I can stick it down on my fabric, and if I don't like it, I can peel it right back up.
That's really cool.
The other advantage of it is that I have 2 little boys in my house, and if they run past my project that I'm trying to arrange, nothing happens to it because the pieces don't move.
That's very important.
Yeah. And then I do a double blanket stitch around the edges of all my pieces most of the time.
Tell me again, a double blanket stitch? What does that mean?
All machines pretty much have a built-in stitch that's a blanket stitch.
Yeah.
We all know that one.
Yeah.
But Bernina's, and I'm sure other brands have it too, but I still want a Bernina. Bernina's have one that's called a double blanket stitch. So in a single blanket stitch, it goes over, back, down, right?
Yeah.
In a double, it goes over, back, up, down, down, over, back. So it goes over everything at least 2, if not 3 times. And it gives it a thicker line so that your thread choices actually show up.
Interesting.
So if I had, say, a yellow and green batik that I was using for a leaf, I could stitch the outline in yellow and it would really show up if I wanted it to. Otherwise, I'll stitch it in green and make it match. But it gives me another color choice to use. And it's kind of thick, kind of like old-fashioned animation where you see the black line around the shapes.
Yeah, interesting. And why do you think people like me and others are a little intimidated by machine applique? Because, once I do it, I'm like, why am I so worried about this? But there is this kind of fear, I think.
I think our inner perfectionists come out when we applique. I don't know why, but I think they do.
Yeah. I think probably too. But it's forgiving. Do you think that?
Yeah. The other thing that I like about doing the double blanket stitch is because it takes it longer to stitch out. I have more time to think about how it's going to turn the curve or the point.
Interesting.
Or gives me a little more think time before I have to pivot the fabric.
Yes, I like that. How fast, that made me think about thinking time. When you free motion quilt, are you going really fast or slow? Or like, what's your speed? Or what do you recommend people in terms of their speed on free motion quilting?
If I'm tracing a pattern or going around the edge of an applique, I'm going really slow.
Interesting.
If I'm doing a background filler where I don't have to think about it because I can just make the pattern and it's not, I mean, my fillers aren't designed to be symmetrically perfect. They're designed to be able to make them all a variety of sizes and shapes within the same filler.
They look really forgiving when I look at the ones I've seen, which I really like. They're not like some of them are like you have to be so perfect that every time you mess up, it's like you're just cringing.
There's a lot of straight, but I know how hard it is. And there are times I don't want to work that hard.
Yeah.
So I try to find ways around doing that are easier for me to accomplish, but still look great.
Interesting. Now, one of the things I have that I'm getting better at machine quilting, and I'm doing it both on the domestic, and we have a long arm here now which is great to sort of practice on. I'm still really bad at making symmetrical curves. Like the curving part, like they always look a little bit weird. I don't know why. Like, is that just hard, or is that just because I can't make circular things?
No, that's just hard. I think that doing a long curve is the hardest thing to do. Short curves are easy. Curves that are longer than 3 inches, 4 inches get really, really hard, which is why a lot of people will go to ruler work to give them that curve to do. Yeah.
Because you do a lot of curves in you do all kinds of things, but your curves look reasonable. I'm looking like flower clamshells. Are you... let me see. Is that all free motion? You are. Wow. How are you getting that half circle to actually look like a half circle and not like a rectangle? Mine look like rectangles.
Probably because I've quilted them so many times. The other thing that I learned, I don't even remember who taught me this. It might have been Ginny Beyer, but I don't remember. She was saying if you draw a circle and it's not perfect, your eye sort of visually fixes that.
Interesting.
So she was talking about not making your circles perfectly perfect, because then it's easier on the eyes anyway.
Interesting.
I don't remember exactly what she said, but
when you're doing that half circle,
I don't worry about if my
you don't worry about it. When you do the half circle, do you know in your mind, are you trying to get to that apex point at the top? Like, how are you thinking it through in your mind to get to that circle that's reasonable?
I just kind of think about where I want to end and how wide I want it to be.
And how wide you want it to be.
Right. And
the length and the width.
I think about the quarter circle because we all know that arc with our eyes pretty well.
So you're saying how tall I want it and how wide I want it, and then it just kind of works in your brain.
I visually kind of think about where I want it to be on the fabric.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay, I'll try that. I don't know. I'm like not an artist, so it's really interesting. I'm like, can somebody who can barely, handwrite free motion quilt? This is the challenge. It's getting better, so I don't know. Okay, let's go back to our list.
I always tell my beginning students, buy a panel.
Yeah.
Because it's something that you didn't put hours of work into.
That's right.
And quilt it 10 minutes a day, and you will see the difference in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and this one I have one on I have actually 2 panels. I have 2 panels right now that I'm working on. That's exactly it. I'm tracing one of the ones that has lots of things, so I can sort of trace and get used to it. And then I'm doing fillers around it. And then the other one I'm trying to do more fancy stuff, and it's looking really crappy. But I am embracing my crappy free motion quilting at the moment because, one day it might not be, or it might still be. That's okay. It's not that is not my profession. So I have to keep telling myself that. Okay, tell me about being a island batik ambassador.
I have a good quilting friend who lives in Colorado. And one day, about 6 months into blogging, she sends me a link and said, you should do this, because she knows I work in batiks. And I went, yes, I should. So I applied. And basically the process is they accept a certain number every December, and you apply to be one for the following year. And if you're accepted, then they send you a box of fabric twice a year with all their new collections and things to do. And then every month you make a project for them, and they give you the topics ahead of time for the whole year so that you know what different things you're going to be making. And then every month you do your project, you blog about it, you add your link to the spreadsheet, and they share it on their social media accounts. And they've just been really, really great to work with. One time I was short on fabric, so they sent me more. And they also, a lot of the ambassadors do pattern design for quilts in their catalogs that quilt shops can order through Island Batiks and then kit up or whatever they choose to do.
That's really cool. So they get people using their fabric, you get the newest, coolest fabric to work with, and then potentially your patterns could then have a greater distribution through
Correct.
the process. Do they have you, is there any, first you always are using your original patterns when you do the work, or you use other people's patterns?
They encourage us to do our own patterns, but they don't mind if we do other people's patterns sometimes.
Interesting.
For me, I like the creative challenge. There are things that I have made for Island Batik that I never would have done had it not been part of the challenges.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so it pushes me outside of my box. But the other thing that I found about both working for them and blogging is I have gotten into making quilts that aren't show quilts.
Yeah.
That are things that I'm putting up on my blog where I'm testing something out or I'm trying something new.
Interesting.
And it's kind of given me freedom.
Yeah.
From having to be a perfectionist all the time, which I really enjoy.
That's really interesting. I saw that you were paper piecing as part of one of the things you were doing, and I thought that was really interesting because it was like a rectangle, two triangles that were a rectangle. I love paper piecing. Tell me more about how you use paper piecing.
I use paper piecing when I want something that's pretty exact.
Yeah.
That I don't think I can rotary cut and get it to turn out the way that I want it to turn out.
Yeah.
Then I will turn to paper piecing to do those pieces so that they come out exactly the way that I want them to.
And then you just make them the size you want, the finished size. You make your own paper piecing pattern.
I go into EQ and I draw it up and print it out on paper on my computer and go for it.
Interesting. How important is EQ? For people who don't know what EQ is, tell me what EQ is and how hard is it and how important is it to your work?
EQ stands for Electric Quilter. They're currently on version 8, came out last year. I still have version 7. I haven't upgraded to 8 yet. It's on one of those lists of things to do that I haven't gotten to.
Yeah.
Because 7 works for me. And I know there's features in 8 that are supposed to be fabulous. But for me, it lets me draw my blocks and what I'm thinking in a way that's systematic and easy to print and easy to use. I have Adobe Illustrator too, and sometimes I use that, but most of the time I find that EQ does what I need it to do in order to be able to design and try things out. What I like about it is if I'm designing a piece pattern, say for Island Batik, I can put my colors in there and I can see what it's going to look like, and I can change the design if I don't like it, or figure out a way to highlight a fabric without having to actually cut pieces.
Yeah.
Because you can import the fabrics into the program so that you can actually see what it'll look like.
Right. How expensive is the program if people are listening?
I think the new version is in the $200 range somewhere. Yeah. I would say that if you're going to do some serious quilt design, it's worth the money. I bought the program originally years ago, and every time they have an upgrade, I generally pay for it. I just haven't paid for EQ yet.
Yeah. No, it's hard to upgrade sometimes, you know.
Yeah.
I have to say, the comfort of, like, you just like, well, what if I don't like the next version?
Yeah, I know how to use this version.
Exactly.
make me do what I want.
Exactly.
I'm sure there are cool things, but I know this one.
Exactly. Really interesting. Well, this is so cool. Now, does Island Batik also pay you as an ambassador, or is it more the free fabric and the relationship and the social media component?
It's the free fabric. It's the challenges for me. I enjoy that part of it. They have a relationship with Hobbs and Orifil, so we got some of that in our boxes this year, which has been really fun to try out some of Hobbs and new batting and different weights of Orifil thread that I haven't used before. And, there's a social network. We have our own private Facebook group of ambassadors where if we get stuck on something, we ask each other questions. And it's been fun because I have quilting friends now all over the country.
Yeah.
And I go to Quilt Festival in Houston every year, and every year I meet another one
that's
coming in from somewhere else that I haven't met before, and we instantly have this connection because we've been ambassadors, and
that's
it's
really
just fun.
Great. I love it. Will you be at Quilt Festival this year?
Of course. I have 2 quilts in the show this year. I'm so excited.
You do? Oh, that's so cool. That is so cool.
I'm so excited. It's been a long time since I got 2 in.
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited. We are there. We have an interactive nonprofit booth. So we are trying to figure out what we're doing with it. I mean, we're doing copyright stuff, but we'll do other stuff too. So we'll see you there. I would love to hook up and maybe even do a Facebook Live near your quilt and talk about it.
Absolutely.
It would be so great. Would you be interested?
Totally do that. That. I'll be there Thursday through Sunday.
Thursday through Sunday. Great. That's so
Saturday.
cool.
Saturday.
Can you send me an email just saying Houston Quilt Market and your dates so that we can set up a time? We're going to start to make a schedule.
Are you going to be at market or are you going to be at festival?
I'm at all of it. I'm there the full 12 days.
Be at festival.
12 days.
I wish I could go for the whole thing, but there's this thing called teaching.
Yes, I know.
They don't let me have that much time off.
No. Well, my law school did not, because they knew of my schedule, just because they don't ask me. I'm only teaching 1 day a week in the fall, so I'm pretty psyched. So I think I'm able to go for the 12 days and only have to teach once online. So we'll have an online thing on one of the Tuesdays. So yeah, I'm pretty psyched about that. So
have you ever been before?
I was there last year, and I was such a baby. We were just starting this project, and I just have to tell you, it was like Disneyland, but incredibly overwhelming. So I'm really curious what it will be like this year when I know people. I think it's just going to be either really not overwhelming or more overwhelming. I can't quite figure out what's going to happen. Do you tell me about your experiences with festival?
We went the first year because it was held a little bit early, and I was working at a year-round school, and it happened to be one of the weeks I was off. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have the opportunity. Let's go. And we've been back every year. This will be our 10th year.
And who's we? Is that you and your mom?
Me and my mom.
That's so cool.
And I have good friends that I've met down there that we room with, and now we've dragged my cousin into it, so she comes with us every year. And it's just a blast to me. I mean, everybody's there, and you make new social connections in the class. Teachers are amazing. I'm taking a class from a lady from Germany this year who I took a class from last year too, who's just a stitch. And, she doesn't come to the States that often. So it's the opportunity to take classes from international teachers.
That's really cool.
And, the fabric and the thread and the quilts are just all overwhelming. And it's like you said, it's like being in Disneyland.
It really is. And
I have a lot of friends
nice.
who aren't going this year, and I'm like, I think it'd be a crabby apple if I didn't get to go.
Yeah, no, that's really great. I can't wait. Well, this is great. And then I would love to interview your mom, too, if she's interested. We've done a couple of daughter-mom. We've done 2 of them, but it would be really great to chat with her if she's interested. It'd be great. And your son.
Yep, now, my 2 sons have both made their very first quilt.
Really? That's very cool. Did you like it?
What do you think, Vincent? Did you like it?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Tell her what you did with your quilt. Why did you make the quilt?
I made my quilt so I could enter it in MQX in the kids section, and we had no clue that when a kid entered it, they got a free sewing machine. So I now have a Janome new home.
No! Oh, how cool is that? That is so cool. And what show is that? What show were you in?
MQX.
It's called Machine Quilters Exposition. They have 2 every year, with one in the spring in New Hampshire and one in the fall in Illinois.
That's so cool. Wow. And what colors did you pick for your quilt?
It was this flower-like color and this teal blue.
Oh, how cool. So do you think you'll do another one?
Print.
What?
It was a cave facet print.
Oh, how cool. And did you think you'll do another one?
Yeah, I'm working on another one, actually.
Awesome. Well, you'll have to come on and talk about your experiences, too. I think that would be awesome. Kids that quilt. It's awesome.
It is awesome.
Oh, it's exhausting, too. It's so true. That's very cool. How old is he?
I'm turning 10 in August.
10. Awesome. 10 is a awesome year.
You know what's interesting is both of the kids have quilted their quilts on my mother's long arm.
Oh, I think I saw pictures of that. How was that?
Yeah, how's that?
Do you like the long arm?
It was interesting.
Yeah, why?
I have no fear of the long arm.
Right. I'm curious why interesting. What was interesting about it? Were you not convinced?
It's different from the other sewing machines where you don't have to move the quilt, you just move the machine around.
Yeah, was it easier or harder? Or just different?
For me, it was easier.
Interesting. So, yeah, I think I saw pictures with your grandma, right?
Yep.
That's so cool. Yeah, I think it's different, but it's easy. It is easier and harder at the same time. Really interesting. Now, Suzy, do you do domestic when you are quilting? Are you doing it on a long arm or a domestic machine or both?
I'm a domestic machine quilter.
Interesting. And your mom is
one on my mom's long arm when she first got it, and it just wasn't my thing. I couldn't control it like I can it on my home machine. She now has new wheels for her long arm that she got maybe a year or two ago. And she says I should really try it again. And it was funny. We actually loaded one of my quilts onto the machine last weekend. And I got scared. So she ended up quilting it. I got to try it on something that's not as important.
It doesn't matter. Oh my gosh, it's so true. So we've had this machine, I think, a couple months now. And all I was doing was practice. So I have the first quilt on there. And I'm just like, this is so stressful.
Yeah, I got to try some practice before I actually quilt.
Yeah. I don't know. It's going okay. I keep thinking like, okay, nobody has to see this quilt. So.
Yeah. Just, do some charity quilts instead of, something that you care more about.
Anyway, well, this has been awesome. We were very naughty and we did 42 minutes. See, I told you. There's no way to do a half an hour. It's impossible. There's too much to ask you. Well, I'm super psyched. Ask your mom if she's interested in coming on the show. Email me about the fact that you've got two things in the two quilts in the show, and that we were going to do a Facebook Live, so that I have the list going. So just we can start to plan. We'll have some of the Quilting Army there. We're going to have a booth. We are going to try to figure out how to have guest people come in and hang out with us. So maybe you could come by and say hi in our booth. And I don't know. We just haven't figured it out. My latest thing with the booth is I want one that has like really comfortable chairs and couch, and it's called Just Wanna Sit.
That's fun.
Yeah, because we can't compete with the beauty, but we can really compete with comfort. That was my thought.
There you go.
And then people could like hang out, talk about what they've bought, how the show's going for them,
Yeah, and people love to do that.
Right? Yeah. I know Quilt Alliance did like the 3-minute sort of what did you get at the quilt show thing. So I don't know. We're figuring it all out. But I would love to see your quilts and have you there talking about them. It'd be so great. So cool. Do you want to review this before we put it up, or are you good with what we chatted about?
I'm good with what we chatted about.
Okay, cool. Awesome. All right, good. Well, next step, send me an email. See if your mom wants to be interviewed. If so, just give her the link, and we'll go from there. I'm so glad you spent time with me. I am going to try to do some of your challenges. The brick wall free motion quilt along. I'm going to try to do some of that on the ridiculous quilt I have on the long arm today, because I think, why not? Let's just see if this works. I love them. The flower circles are really awesome. Light bulbs, triple circles.
And
they look great.
The thing about it is they don't have to be tiny. You can make those light bulbs an inch long, but you can also make them 5 inches long, and they all
I never do big. I'm always afraid of big, but big.
Me too.
Big seems like people just see more of the mistakes. That's my
Could
thing.
be.
I don't know. It's probably not true. It's all a big mistake.
Or it's all in our heads.
It's all in our heads. But it does help when you wash it, right? Like, once you wash it, the mistakes don't show as much, seems like.
No.
Right?
No. They become the texture.
Yeah. So, all right. This is great. We didn't talk about, oh, wait, crap, don't leave. We have to do one more thing. We didn't talk about the intellectual property, which is what the whole project is about. All right, hold on. So, intellectual property. So you've got the copyright notice on your new book. Let me read it. All rights reserved. You put the copyright. You put your name, the date. This is really good. No part of this publication may be produced, distributed, or transmitted in any form or by any means, including photocopy, recording, without the prior written permission, except in case of brief quotations embodied in critical reviews and certain other non-commercial uses. Well, see here. So you got it pretty. You're doing better than the professional publisher people. That's really interesting. How did you get to this copyright and rights statement thing? How did you get there?
My gut says I probably copied out of my AQS book exactly what they had.
Can you take a look at your AQS book and send me a copy of that? Send me the front page and the copyright page. We just did a ton of martingale last night, and they put the same one in every single book, which is really interesting, regardless of what the book is, which I thought was interesting. So basically what you're saying is you don't want other people to copy it commercially. You're acknowledging that there is some fair uses that might be permitted.
For promotional reasons. Yeah.
For what?
For promotional reasons.
For promotional reasons.
Like if you wanted to review the book, obviously you're going to need to
got it.
Some of the materials. And, if you are working on your own and you need to make a copy of a page so you can try tracing it or whatever.
Right. So personal uses, I need to make a copy because I'm going to trace it. You don't want people making a copy of all of it and giving it to their friends.
No, which is part of the reason I have it professionally spirally bound, because that makes it a little harder to do.
Interesting. And other non-commercial uses permitted by copyright law. That's fair use, right? That's the whole other. Yeah. I mean, now, let's say, because this is the example I'm using. Let's say we have a class where we are going to take, I don't know, something that you do that everybody does, clams. Let's say clamshells or whatever, or something that everybody has. I don't really know what that would be because yours are all different. You're messing me up on my example, okay? You're really messing me up on my example because none of them are flat. Okay, feathers. How about feathers? So we're going to take feathers and we're going to have a feather class, and let's say I say, okay, look, we're going to look at all the different ways that feathers were made. So I take one page from your book and one page from another book, because what we're trying to do is analyze, is there a certain method to feathers or is it not? Like, thinking through it, like in your educational hat side, do you feel comfortable? Because you're a teacher, so you use fair use all the time. I suspect you make copies and crap in your copies of stuff and things that you fair use is super important to teachers. We have to have it, or our classrooms would fall apart. So how do you feel about that in terms of this stuff? Is it different? Is your regular job classroom different than the quilting classroom? That's my question. No.
Except I don't have children whining at me in my quilting classes.
They're better behaved.
Yeah. Well, most of the time, not always, but most
and the parents aren't involved.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the classroom, so we want people to buy the books, buy your book. I'm telling you, buy the book. But it also means there's some situations where, paper piecing or other things where the book is telling you to copy it. That's okay. And then if we're doing a comparative kind of thing, or something that requires you to do a commentary. Is that right? Are you frozen? The very end? Let's see if it comes back. So the internet was rude to us, and it did not finish recording the last bit, but we were just about to say goodbye anyway. Suzy Webster was awesome as a guest, and we've invited her mom, so we'll have a mother-daughter duo. This will be our second one of these. Can't wait for you to hear it. Can't wait to record it. Recording it today. So that was a little bit of Suzy. So this is Elizabeth Townsend Guard. You've been listening to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School. We want to hear from you. Join our army, our quilting army. Go to our Facebook page. Suggest people